My name is Rena Eupitis, and I'm sitting in the garden at Wintergreen Studios, which is a 204-acre educational wilderness retreat center. Wintergreen is located at 90, wait for it, Wintergreen Lane in the township of South Frontenac. We're just off the Canoe Lake Road, 15 minutes from Westport, Ontario. There are many buildings at Wintergreen, and most of them are built using sustainable techniques. The buildings are all interconnected by a network of trails, beginning at the west end of the property and weaving their way to the east, where there's a lake we call Paddy's Lake. You'll get a chance to see 3 buildings today: the Lodge, the Beach House, and the Hobbit House. The Lodge was built in 2008. It was designed as a solar building and also straw bale, with straw as the infill, with post and beam construction supporting the walls. The straw is 14 inches thick, and there's an inch of plaster on each side, so the walls are 16 inches and have magnificent insulating properties. One of the features of many straw bale homes or buildings like the Lodge at Wintergreen is that people install a truth window, and that's a little spot where you can see the straw behind the glass. The floor is concrete, it's slab on grade, so we have great thermal mass as well from the concrete floors and also from the plaster. And this means that in most hot summer days, it's cool because of the cross breezes that we can get through the windows during the night, and warm in the winter because once the building is warm, it stays warm. In addition to the active solar, meaning the photovoltaic panels on the roof that go to the batteries and feed our electrical system, there's also passive solar. The building was designed to take advantage of the south-facing exposure, so we get beautiful sunlight in the winter, not too much in the summer because of the massive overhang on the south side. It's a labor of love for sure. It took us 6 months to put it together. When I say us, I mean hundreds of people who helped volunteer to build the building. The Beach House is a mixture of straw bale and cordwood. And the reason that we used both building styles for this house is that it was part of a course to teach people how to build in sustainable ways. So with the Beach House, there is one wall that's part cordwood and part straw. There's another wall that's completely straw, and then the remaining walls are all cordwood, so that the participants in the course could see how to build with both of these kinds of techniques. The Hobbit House is about 1.5 kilometers from the parking lot at Wintergreen Studios, and you reach it by taking a charming walk through the woods. Well, actually not a walk, a fairly intense hike. And your reward when you arrive is this lovely little building in the middle of a forest glade. The Hobbit House is built entirely out of cordwood, using recycled, reclaimed cedar fence rails. People often ask how many loads of mortar and concrete it took to build the Hobbit House, and I can tell you 207. That includes the slab-on granite slab, so a double slab floor, and the mortar that's used on the outside to hold the cordwood into place. You'll see that the Hobbit House is covered with a living roof. This is another signature style of the buildings at Wintergreen. 7 of our buildings have living roofs, including the Lodge, the Beach House, and the Hobbit House. To assemble the living roof, you first have to build a really strong deck. And we use 2x6 pine with very, very big rafters. And then that deck is covered with a layer of plywood, followed by a non-permeable membrane, otherwise known as pond liner, followed by insulation, another non-permeable membrane, pond liner, and that is covered with a recycled, reclaimed drainage mat that allows any excess drainage to take place. And then on top of the drainage mat, you put your your living stuff. In our case, we just grabbed whatever was nearby from the forest and the meadows and just plopped it on top of the roof. Over the years, the living roofs take on their own personalities. On top, we have everything from grasses to hanging strawberry vines to heliopsis to tiny little oak trees. And all of those things are planted by, well, we call them volunteer plants. What comes from the wind, what comes from the birds, what was already in the soil when we dropped it on the roof. So why would anyone build this way? It is, I have to tell you, very labor-intensive, but it's also community building. Each building has a personality, and that happens because the builders get to put in something of their mark. So you'll see beautiful glass jars in the cordwood buildings where people have chosen a particular style and highlighted it by putting it in a particular place in the wall. There's a spot in the Hobbit house right as you enter the door where there's a pocket watch featured in the wall. The pocket watch belonged to my children's great-grandfather, and they placed it very carefully in that spot when we were building the Hobbit house, saying at the time that it's so much better to put it here in the building than in some kind of case on a shelf where no one's ever going to look at it. So there is an aesthetic, there is a beauty to building this way. There's nothing prefab about building sustainably and by hand. And one of the things about designing sustainably is not just to use sustainable materials, but to think about how to build less and use less in the first place. So consuming less means recycling materials. It means building the smallest footprint you can imagine to do the work and the living that you're hoping to do.